And help, let us.
My name is Shalini Konanur. I'm the Executive Director of the South Asian Legal Clinic of Ontario. I'm also a lawyer. Our legal clinic is one of several legal clinics around Ontario that are funded by Legal Aid Ontario. We work specifically with low-income people who identify themselves as South Asian, so that could be people from Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, from Canada, from the US, and even from Europe, and different parts of Africa like Kenya and Tanzania. And we work with clients from within Ontario who are from those parts of the world and who are low income, and we do a number of areas of law like immigration, work with domestic violence, elder abuse, with Ontario Works, Canada Pension Plan, employment law, and human rights.
Oh, even employment.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
yes.
good. About the most of the our question is about the violence against the family and against the women, and also about the forced marriage that they accept the law in summer.
Yes.
About summer.
Yeah.
Why the forced marriage is still is an issue in Canada?
I think many people are surprised to find that forced marriage happens to Canadians a lot more than we thought. And our clinic a few years ago was funded to do a study and take a survey of forced marriage in Ontario. So we only looked at 1 year period, and in that 1 year we had 216 cases reported in our survey just for Ontario.
And just for the South Asian?
Not just for the South Asian, we actually looked at everybody in Ontario. But I think the truth is, when you look at that number, one thing is that that was only 1 year, and that was only in Ontario. So probably the number of cases around Canada is probably much higher than that. But unfortunately, no one has been able to do a full study of the country to figure out how large of an issue it is. But we, on average, get anywhere from 1 to 300 calls a year from around the country on the issue of forced marriage and cases and what to do on those cases. So it's still happening here, and it's still an issue here.
And what do you think about the factor? What factor is causing this issue?
I think there were a lot of different factors. So one of the things that we noticed in our study was we were kind of trying to figure out, is it just certain communities, right? And what we realized from the study is actually it was being reported across different communities across the country, and also that it was being reported for people who were born and raised in Canada, so Canadians, and just themselves, right? So the factors were so many. Some were economic factors, some were cultural factors, some were family tradition factors. So there were so many different factors that were related to why somebody might be forced into marriage. In many of the cases, we found that it was sort of something that the family had historically done forever, right? The idea that young people didn't really get to choose who they were going to be with, that their parents would do that. In some cases, we found that it was for financial reasons, that deals were being made to get citizenship and immigration. And so in those cases, it was economic reasons. In some cases, it was families who were having issues with young people who were coming out as from the LGBT community and wanting to, and were very scared about that, and then wanting their kids to be forced into a marriage to maybe fix what they thought was a problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can say the social issue can be a factor, right?
Social issues absolutely can be a factor, yeah.
Okay. And are you treating the equally for the women that forced marriage and the men as well?
Absolutely. So we don't distinguish here. We take clients on an individual basis, and we've had clients who are men and who are women.
Okay. Based on the Statistics Canada reports on 2009, the men have the violence. Violence happened to the men is almost equal as the woman. And do you have any experience on this? Do you have the men client that has the?
We have seen male clients who've experienced violence, absolutely. We've seen a lot of senior male clients who've experienced elder abuse. But the reality is, for us, the large majority of the cases that we see are women. and we've seen more women facing abuse than we have men. That's not to say that men don't face abuse. I think one of the things that we have to be careful about with some of the statistics we see about the violence being equal is that a lot of the women who face abuse never actually report it. And they're less likely to report that kind of abuse. And so there are a lot of people who don't get even caught by the statistics because they will never speak out about it.
And I heard some of the women are not, some of the men are not reporting too because they said the law is not against them, but it's very hard to prove their claim.
Absolutely, yeah, that could be the case. And there could also be, for men, sometimes a feeling of embarrassment, even more than to even speak about it, right? So that can be the case. So certainly there are cases where men are facing violence, but I think when you talk to a lot of people who work in this sector, still the majority seems to be women.
But do you think it's true that the law is a little bit harder for the men to prove their claim?
No, so I don't think that's true. What I think is true is that the law makes it hard for any victim of violence to prove their claim. And the reality is, especially in criminal courts, the success rate on those types of cases is very low for men and women, for both. And so there's been a lot of complaint about how the law and the way it's set up creates a barrier for any victim to report a case, and why it's so difficult for people to come forward, because the chance that they will have success and have a good outcome is still not very high. I think men might feel that there's a perception that the law is harder on them, but the truth is I've worked with many people, men and women, and I find that the law is just hard on everybody.
Okay. If we go back to the forced marriage, I was talking to some of the people, and especially with the youth people. And when I asking about how much information they had about the forced marriage, and most of them was confused, and they said it's arranged marriage. But I think these two subjects are different, right?
Absolutely, they're different and intertwined, right? So what we've tried to do since the start of our work is to do a lot of education on what forced marriage is and how it's different from arranged marriage. So we've tried, but I think the problem is that what we need in this country is a national awareness campaign. So an organization like the South Asian Legal Clinic is a very small organization that only serves Ontario. There's only so much that we can do in terms of getting out the word, right? We've been asking for the federal government to actually create a national awareness campaign, and one that actually would go into schools where young people are so that they could get more information on it. So forced marriage and arranged marriage are very different, and in our training what we try to explain to people is that the whole issue of forced marriage is about consent. So my parents can come to me and say, we would like to arrange your marriage to someone. If I'm okay with it, if I consent to it, and the other person is okay with it and they consent to it, that's not a forced marriage. That's us giving our consent to our parents arranging our marriage, which happens in so many different cultures, right? Where it becomes a forced marriage is if I or the person I'm marrying actually don't give consent. We don't want to do it, we don't agree to do it, but we're forced into it. You know, our parents have raised us and told us we don't have a choice, right? You have to do this. That is a forced marriage. So it is really kind of tricky, right? Because you can have marriage is sort of along a line, right? Of where you consent to it and where you maybe don't. And so for people who call us, we speak to them about their situations. We explain to them all of the different ways in which people can get married, and they make the decision on whether they think their marriage was forced or not forced.
Yeah, especially the marriage is one of the human rights articles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and one thing that I don't want people to be confused about is that we have a view that there is absolutely nothing wrong with arranged marriage. And that's common across many cultures. My own parents had an arranged marriage and have been married for 40 years, right? And they're very happy, right? And many of my family members have had arranged marriages. Forced marriage is different in that what we're saying there is that in those cases, one or two or both of the people getting married are not really consenting. They don't want it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Another question is about the service for the children, violence against the children and violence against the seniors. do you have some cases in this regard? Or?
We do, so we work a lot with seniors. Unfortunately, we've seen the numbers of seniors facing elder abuse kind of growing. And so we work with a lot of seniors who are trying to leave situations of abuse, to help them to settle their income, to figure out where they'll live, to deal with any immigration issues, and then of course to deal with the violence if they want to call the police or what they want to do about it, if they need counseling, that kind of thing. I think the problem for a lot of seniors is they still have the pressure of not wanting to go against their children,
Exactly.
right? And so it's so difficult for people to come and speak about what they're facing at home, because they know then that they're doing something to their own children who may be the ones who are being violent towards them, or their grandchildren if the grandchildren are being violent. So it becomes very hard. So the idea there is that we also do a lot of education around talking to families about that type of violence, maybe why it happens and how families can get support so that everyone can kind of work together to figure it out. But it's tough. In terms of violence against children, we actually don't do a lot of work with children. There is actually a legal aid clinic called Justice for Children and Youth that is funded specifically to work with children. So when we see cases with children, we often will refer them to that clinic.
But how you can approach the children that violence against them? Because the children cannot support themselves. And
Absolutely.
cannot work with someone else.
So this is the difficult part, right?
Yes.
So if a child is involved, unless they approach us, there's nothing that we can do. We don't actively go out and approach children on their own, because generally, even to speak to a child, you would need the consent of a parent, right?
Yeah.
And so, especially children of high school age, between 14 and 18, who somehow have gotten the word about legal clinics or any other resources, are welcome to approach us. And kids of a young age have approached us even in forced marriage situations. Other than that, we don't actually work one-on-one with children. A lot of times in cases where there's violence with children, you'll see the Children's Aid Society involved, and they'll hook them up with different resources. That being said, we do a lot of education on family violence. So we go to different spaces, to schools, to temples, mosques, gurdwaras, all over the place. Anyone who wants to invite us to talk about those issues and try and open up that topic so that people feel a little bit more comfortable to talk about it, and also to know what resources are available if they need help.
Yeah. And what's your suggestion once we saw someone or feeling someone is violence is happening to them, but they don't want to involve the law in their family or their loved one? How we can approach them? How we can help them?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
our approach has always been that people have to be able to have the freedom to make the choice to see what they want to happen. We can't step in and force somebody to do something they don't want to do. That being said, I think if you know somebody who's facing an issue with violence, the first thing to do is to figure out, depending on where they live, what are the different resources in that area. For example, if you live in Peel region, there is a domestic violence hub called the Safe Center of Peel. In that center, they have counselors, they have lawyers, they have housing people, they have all sorts of people that person could go to very quietly to start getting information and thinking about what they might want to do. In York Region, they have the York Region Center for Community Safety, the same concept. And same in Toronto. So the idea is to think about the first step for that person is probably not even the law, but really the ability to talk how to get money and how do you get housing. There's so many things that are involved in it. So the first step for me is oftentimes not the law, but actually first having the person feel like they can at least talk about it and figure out what it is they want to do. So if you saw someone in that situation, the first step is to say, do you want to talk about it? And then also maybe help them to figure out who they could even go and talk to. And sometimes the safest thing to do is to make sure they talk to someone that's not in their community. Right? Somebody outside their community that they feel safe, that it's confidential, that it's anonymous, because a lot of people are worried that word will get back, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, thank you for your time, and if you have some...
Just the last question, so many, because of Canada or United States, they are the even or very popular for many young generation. Many women and many men. They want just, we see that they come to Canada as a marriage, you know, but when they come here, they separated. They are coming just, they don't want to be with the other partner or other. So in this case, what do you have advice for the people?
So
Because you know that $60,000 is for the marriage. Some people get married and they come to Canada and
then they
then
want to leave, right?
they leave.
Yeah. So now, under the law as it stands, people who come to Canada who are sponsored through marriage come as conditional permanent residents. So the condition for those people is they actually have to live with their sponsor for 2 years. And if they leave before those 2 years, that immigration can investigate them and actually remove their immigration status. So it's a new system, actually, one that just changed late in 2012. So there are a few things, though, about this issue. A couple of things to think about are, you know, when people get married and come to Canada, sometimes the relationships don't work out, right?
Yes.
From both sides, from the person who's sponsored and from the person who are coming, they just don't work out. And that's not any different than people who get married here and whose relationships don't work out, right? So in those cases, if that's the situation, I think people who come and have tried to make it work and it doesn't work, they should be allowed to leave. In other cases, if they're coming really to defraud, right? If they're coming just to get immigration and then they're automatically leaving, they're going to be caught now by this new system that will investigate them if they leave and could take away their permanent residence.
And you know that you have a lot of experience. There is a very important issue that for sure there are different, not total different, but different culture in Eastern and West. I don't say that which one is good, which one is not right.
Yeah.
But there are different culture. For instance, here most of the women, husband and wife, they have separate account. But back home, it doesn't make sense. All of them are together, everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean that, how do you advise to the teenager who are coming from there, back home, they want to come to Canada? For instance, they haven't been here, they haven't seen the culture. And for sure, there are a lot of differences. How do you advise for a successful this kind of marriage?
For young people who are coming to Canada?
Yeah, for instance, ladies over there, man is here. They got together through internet, and the lady or man, doesn't matter, mostly ladies, want to come to Canada.
Yeah.
But for sure, there are different culture. Here, man and woman have to work.
Yeah. Well,
back home, technically, maybe it is not the same because of the economical situation, the system situation, because over there is not hourly rate, hourly wages, so it is monthly, so technically it is different than Canada that you can go on. So it is a lot, some kind of this issue. So you have experience. How do you advise to this young generation?
Well, I think anybody who's coming to Canada under sponsorship, they should, obviously you should be feeling comfortable with the person you've married and that you're coming and that you feel strongly that it's a good connection, right? Secondly, the world now is a bit of a smaller place because of things like the internet, right? And it is easy, it is not totally easy, but it is easier for people to understand a little bit more about Canada even before they come, right? So you can do a little bit of homework before you come about what employment is like in Ontario, what are the types of jobs people are looking for, how are people paid. But when you get here, this province in particular has a large amount of resources for settlement, right? And I think one thing that happens is a lot of people don't take advantage of going into those settlement offices where they do all of that. They do training on even how to write a resume, how to do a Canadian job interview, how to fill out applications, things about what your rights are in terms of different things. So it's important for people when they come and when they're ready, if they're able to access those kind of services so that they can learn that stuff. However, the other thing that's important is obviously everybody's relationships are different, right? And so to have success in your relationship, you have to have agreement between the two of you of what you're going to do in that relationship. Some people will come here and their families might say, we don't want you to work. Some people will come here and their families might say, we do want you to work, right? So I think people have to be very clear when they're getting married about what, not just that romantic part of love and all of that, but about the practical stuff. You know, where will I be living? What are the expectations? What should I be doing? What will you be doing? That kind of stuff. It's always a great idea when people come, man or woman, to go to a bank, understand our banking system, know how to access it, and if you can, to open your own bank account, right? All of those things are helpful to you in terms of being able to be protected here and also being able to have your own freedom, right? Even though you're married, it's important that you understand the country that you're coming into, right?
So,
The culture.
I have a question, maybe as a curiosity. How do you see the influence of the Hollywood and Bollywood on the marriages? Because really, you see that on the Hollywood, everything is, they are very, they are in big homes and they are very romantic and
same with Bollywood is even more.
I haven't experienced on that one. That's fine.
Bollywood
Really?
is more.
Yeah, so that's, but the point is that in reality, the
It's
man
not
is
the reality.
no, in reality in Canada, many are immigrants are high educated, but they have to work in Tim Horton in gas station or construction or taxi driver and long hours. So technically, if somebody has to be romantic at the midnight, if said there is any flower shop to be open at the -20 to bring the flower. So really, how do you see? Have you any thought of that one?
Well, I think we've had lots of clients who've come to Canada who didn't realize how much harder it would be than what they thought. I think lots of times our own clients coming from different South Asian countries think Canada is going to be a land of opportunity. They're going to come here, they're going to get jobs right away, they're not going to face issues. And then they come, they realize that even though a lot of them are highly educated, their skills are not recognized here. They have to work in places that they never thought they would have to work in. And that does something to them emotionally too, right?
Exactly.
Then you have people falling into depression and getting even more angry. And life is not as easy here as what they thought it was going to be. And I think people have to sort of set aside that romantic notion of what it's like to be in North America and have to do some real research on what the reality is. And if you even do newspaper search, there are thousands of articles on how difficult it is for immigrants to settle in Canada, right? And the information is there if you want to look for it instead of pretending. I think even when people come to see us at a legal clinic, they have an idea of what justice is like in Canada. And once they start navigating the law and the justice system, they realize that in a lot of cases, it's not what they thought it would be, and they're not going to get what they wanted.
Exactly.
It's harder than it looks, and oftentimes it's not very different from what they had back home. Right?
Yeah.
Your kindness lets us to ask more questions. How did you address the obstacle you face personally as an ethnic? For sure, there are a lot of obstacles in your school, in your neighborhood, in your law school, in your environment. How did you address that one, and how is your advice to people for sure are facing that one not to be disappointed and courageous to?
Absolutely. I think the thing that we haven't said is that most of us face systemic racism and individual racism in Canada. There are barriers in our system for racialized people, right? Myself included. It's challenging because just the other day, I actually was born and raised here. My parents came from India a long time ago in the late 60s, and I was born here. And the other day, somebody in a coffee shop started yelling at me and told me to go back to the country I came from, right? So it's not that we don't face those kinds of things. It's difficult to address it. I mean, our organization addresses it from a systemic level. So we are part of campaigns to make accreditation of people's skills a lot easier than what they are. We're part of campaigns to address racism in the workplace. I think as an individual, if you face those kinds of barriers, our organizations, legal clinics, the Human Rights Legal Support Center are places you should contact to see if they can assist you with that. However, we also have to we have to be smart in how we make our contacts and how we move up as well. And unfortunately, sometimes we are held back by that kind of racism. So it's difficult, but it's not insurmountable. I still think Canada is quite a great place. Ontario is quite a great place in terms of trying to overcome those types of things and making those things not a barrier for people. But it's something that people have to have in their mind when they come here, that some of the things they're facing are because of problems of systemic racism. For example, in Peel region, if your skin is brown or black, you are significantly more likely to be pulled over by the police for no reason whatsoever. Right? And so these are things that we have to be aware of, and it's up to the individual how much they want to fight back against that, because that also takes a lot of energy, right?
And costs
and
money
time.
too.
Costs a lot of money, takes a lot of energy, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully in the good toward the positive step to address the racism, the new commissioner of Ontario Human Rights is a lady,
Yeah,
lawyer,
she's a
and from
South
I guess
Asian
that,
lady,
yeah, from
Rainey
South Asia. Yeah, so it is very,
Mandani, yeah.
it is very great news. So
Yeah, and you know, and hopefully as you see more and more people who've experienced racism then working in places of power on the issue, that it might impact. If you've had personal experience, right?
thank you so much. I appreciate
Yeah,
your time
thanks
and
so much. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
If you've had personal experience, right?
thank you so much. I appreciate
Yeah,
your time
thanks
and
so much. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
If you've had personal experience, right?